Well, our first step here is to factor that denominator. So that's a difference of 2 squares, so we have x minus 2, that expression times the expression x plus 2. And upstairs we have x minus 1, that's greater than or equal to 0. So now we're ready to graph, draw our number line, x. And the values of x that take the denominator to 0 are 2 and negative 2. So negative 2 and 2. And the value of x that takes the numerator to 0 is 1. So let's see, 1. Now, we've got an equal sign associated with this inequality, so we can use a solid dot on the 1, but because 2 and negative 2 will take that denominator to 0 and division by 0 is undefined, we'll put open circles at those points. Now we're ready to sign our graph. And let's see, if we let x be something like negative 10, we'll have, replacing x with negative 10, we'll have the product of, or the quotient of an odd number of negatives, which is negative. If we let x be something like 0, we'll have the quotient of an even number of negatives, which will be positive. If we let x be something like 3 halves, which is between 1 and 2, think of a buck and a half. Well, this will be positive, but that factor will be negative still, so an odd number of negatives, the quotient or product of an odd number of negatives is negative. And finally, if we let x take on a value in the interval from 2 to infinity, we'll have the quotient of all positives, which will be positive. Now we want greater than or equal to 0, so we'll shade the intervals associated with the plus signs, and we're ready to state solutions. So in set builder notation we have x such that negative 2 is less than x, which is less than or equal to 1, or x is greater than 2. In interval notation we have parenthesis negative 2, 1 bracket, union, parenthesis 2 to infinity, parenthesis, and we're ready to move on to our last inequality. So the first step here is to get 0 on one side, everything else on the other. So we'll subtract 1 from both sides, and we have x plus 4 over x minus 2 minus 1 is less than or equal to 0. And now, we have to get a common denominator. We have to add fractions. So we have x plus 4 over x minus 2 minus 1 times x minus 2 over x minus 2, which gives us our common denominator. So now we have x plus 4 over, and we're going to have that common denominator, x minus 2, and now we have minus times x minus 2. Now it's very important you install these parentheses so you don't forget to distribute that negative sign appropriately. So we have in the numerator x plus 4 minus x plus 2 all over x minus 2, and that's, oh boy, less than or equal to 0. Now the x's add out and we wind up with 6 over x minus 2, which is less than or equal to 0. And now we can graph. And we only have one hash mark, and that's going to be at 2. And we're going to have an open circle here because 2 will take that denominator to 0. So let's pick a value less than 2. How about 0? If we let x be 0, we're going to have the quotient of an odd number of negatives, which is negative. If we let x be some value like 10, which is greater than 2, we're going to have a positive value. And what do we want? We want less than 0, so we'll shade the negatives. So in set builder notation, we've got the set x such that x is less than 2. In interval notation, the solution can be described as parentheses, negative infinity, comma, 2, parentheses, and we are done.